Thanks, guys. That was awesome hearing Ivana's story then, hey, wasn't it? Andrew shared in week one of this series about how we want to be a community that's marked by our mission being centered around uh, being people that see our community transformed by the hope, meaning, and love of Jesus. And then when me, I felt that. I got to feel in her story the hope, meaning, of love of Jesus start to come through. Did that resonate for you guys? Could you feel that? About our values and our mission over this series that hang on a wall. The things that exist and are tangible in people's lives. When we talk about our community being transformed by the hope, meaning, and love of Jesus, it's in the stories like that we see it take root and start to grow. What I love when we're sharing about our values and our vision in that, it's those moments that we like put a stake in the ground and say, this is what we stand for. And how Cam worded it last week, going, these are the songs that we sing as a community together. We sing songs that we want to be a community that's centered on God. We sing songs that are about everybody being welcomed, even those that have an evacuation plan when they walk through the door. We want to be a community that sing these songs that just are centered on God as a community, that everyone's welcome. And today what we're going to do is look at the next one of those values, which is the value of loving like Jesus. How do we as a community together sing the song that we want to be embracing authentic, gracious, and compassionate relationships with each other? What I want to do today is I don't want to focus on like the big picture stories of how Jesus loved us by sacrificing his life for us, because that can sometimes be like this ultimate trump card that we hold up there and we can forget about the everyday nitty-gritty interactions that Jesus used to show love to those around him. What does it mean to love those that we walk beside and interact with every day? So today what I want to actually do is to jump into the really practical sides of how that Jesus showed love, what it means to love like Jesus. Because I think as we look around our world, there's a number of people, many people that are hurting, suffering, that are crying out to experience the love of Jesus in real ways. I did a 5-minute Google search about what are some of the stats for Australia at the moment. And I pulled out 6 stats and it broke my heart. It said that 2 in 5 people struggle with mental health. 50% of people in Australia say that they don't feel like they've got a community around them. 50%. Quarter of people aged 15 to 24 report a systemic sense of feeling isolated and lonely. 15% of people over 55 echoed that sentiment. 35% of people in Australia couldn't affirm that they felt like their life had a sense of purpose behind it. 35% couldn't find purpose. 40% of people said that they didn't feel hopeful about their future. A quarter of Australians said that they don't feel loved. But when you look at Gen Z, the generation coming through and breaking into adulthood now, that jumps to 40% of them said that they don't feel loved. I think our communities are crying out to experience the love of Jesus. When we hear stories like what we heard before about lives being transformed by the hope, meaning, and love of Jesus, I know for many of us sitting here, we've had that similar experience for ourselves. And our world, our communities around us are crying out for that experience that we've had. So this morning, what I want to do is to jump into and look at what does it mean for us as a community to hold the value, to sing the song, to say that each of us are living lives that are loving like Jesus. What comes to mind for yourself when you think about that? If you close your eyes let's go for like 15 seconds, just grab a quick image. What does it practically look like for you loving like Jesus? And how do we build that into our lives? I think as a community here, things that I love and the stories that I hear about us is that We're really great at welcoming people in. I've been to a number of churches over the years, and the stories that come out from people who visit, people who've joined our community, the common narrative is that we're really good at welcoming. We're really good at showing love, being friendly, having personal interactions with people, having relational connections with people, and that's really good. Like, that is not a bad thing at all. That is really good. We're really good at welcoming people when they come through the door. But I think foundationally, when it comes to loving like Jesus, the way Jesus shows love is that he didn't wait for people to come to him. He makes the first move. He steps towards people. Check this out in Philippians. We'll just start here as a foundation. It says, though he, Jesus, was God, he didn't think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges and took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. When he appeared in human form, he humbled himself to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. See, Jesus doesn't sit back, hold on to his privileges, and wait for people to come to him. His first move before everything was to empty himself, to step out from where he was comfortable and to move towards others, taking on their experiences and understanding their life situation. It would be so easy for us to simply just sit back and show love as we do so well to those that walk through our doors. But loving like Jesus doesn't allow us to sit back, to wait for people to come and join us at our table, where we set the rules, the culture, the traditions. No, it calls us to step into other people's experience, to join them at their tables, and to show love to them on their ground. So today, as we look at what it means to love like Jesus, we're going to jump through some of the several day-to-day interactions that Jesus had as he joined people at their tables, as he met them where they were. And as we do so, we're going to ask two questions. That's it, of each of these. First one is, how is Jesus showing love in this interaction? What is he doing? How is he showing love? And for us, who do we need to show that kind of love to in my life? So that's where we're going to go. We're going to jump through a couple of stories today, interactions of Jesus. The first one of these that we're going to look at is from Mark chapter 5, verse 21. And the backdrop of this is that Jesus has just been out on a boat trip, and he's come back and he's just met a synagogue leader, someone who's famous, someone of importance, and he's come to ask him to come and heal his daughter. So as he's on the way with him through the crowds, in the busyness of all this, he has an encounter, an interruption from a woman who's been suffering and bleeding for 12 years. And she reaches out and she touches his clothes and she's healed. So Mark chapter 5, verse 30, it says, at once Jesus realized the power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, who's touched my clothes? You see the people crowding against you, his disciples answered, and yet you ask, who's touched me? But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then a woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, trembling with fear, and told him the whole truth. And he said, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. So how does loving like Jesus play out here? We see it in verse 33, where the woman, knowing what happened to her, came and fell at his feet. She was trembling with fear, and she told him her whole truth, her whole story. Jesus, in this interaction, he slows down enough to see the woman that everyone else is overlooking. He stops in the busyness to hear her story. In doing so, he didn't just heal her physically, but he also healed her inwardly and communally with those around. See, loving like Jesus, if we want to love like Jesus, it means that we need to be prepared to slow down, to see people, and to hear their stories. I've recently been doing a course that's looking at how do we journey with people, how we be a professional supervisor, and how we interact with people and help them reflect on their own work practices. And so much of this course has been about how do we ask questions and listen and stay with people in their story. And in doing this course for myself, I realized that I was very good at hearing people talk, but I was pretty bad at listening. It was easy to hear someone talking and then get distracted with my own thoughts and my own feelings or my own emotions or judgments or assumptions and work out what I was going to say next and not listen to what they were saying, not staying with them in their story. Loving like Jesus means that we're prepared to get into the trench with people, lay aside who we think they are, who we know them to be last time we met with them, and be prepared to hear their stories. I wonder who it might be in your life that you need to love like Jesus by slowing down, seeing them, and hearing their story. Who in your life needs to be loved that way? Let's jump to Mark chapter 1. Jump through these interactions. Here we've got the start of Jesus' ministry. He's traveling around, he's healing a lot of people, and he's traveling through Galilee and preaching in synagogues, casting out demons. And as he's doing this, a man with leprosy came to him. And this is Mark chapter 1, verse 40. Came to him, begged on his knees, "If you're willing, can you make me clean?" Jesus was indignant. He reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." There's a lack of medicine and traditional stuff that we've got now back in Jesus' time. And if someone had a skin disease, they called it leprosy. And because this was always transmitted by being touched, as one person would touch someone else. So what they'll do to treat this is to cast people out, remove them to protect the broader community. You need to be on the outskirts of town. And if you're walking around, you need to let everyone know that you're unclean, that you need to be removed, because we need to protect everyone who's healthy. In conjunction with this, the Jewish tradition that Jesus walked through, so that if anyone touches something unclean, they become unclean. And that's passed on. So here's this man with leprosy who came and begged on his knees, "If you're willing, make me clean." And Jesus reached out his hand and touched this man and said, "I am willing." Loving like Jesus means that we're prepared to embrace those that others judge, isolate, exclude, or who we or they might think that they're unclean. Who do you know that needs to experience love like that? That embraces them when they feel like they should be rejected? I remember hanging out with this guy, and he was being quite open and vulnerable with things going on in his life. And he was sharing them really vulnerably with me and quite emotionally. And I did that thing where I'm like, "Oh, I'll give you a hug." And it was one of those really awkward guy hugs where they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure what should be happening here." And then something switched and he just broke down crying. And I reckon the hug went for about 10 minutes after that. And he was just letting it all out. And something restorative happens when we embrace those that feel like they should be rejected. Loving like Jesus means that we're prepared to embrace those that others judge, isolate, exclude, or they think they're unclean. Who in your life do you need to be loving like Jesus by embracing them and reminding them that they're loved? Loving like Jesus looks like hearing people's stories, embracing those who are rejected. And if we turn to Mark chapter 4 and verse 35, we see another example where that day, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go to the other side." Leaving the crowds behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. There are also other boats going with him. Let's go to the other side. Tell you what, the other side, that's not the place that you want to go, is it? I don't know what you know about the people who live over there, right? Those people that live on the other side. But you've got to steer clear of them, don't you? You know the narrative. We speak this narrative out. You know what you're going to find there. if you go and mess with those people. What does Jesus find? Well, in verse 2 of chapter 5, Jesus climbs out of the boat, and a man possessed by evil spirits and demons came out the tomb to meet him. Of course, that's who's there. This man lived in the burial caves and no longer could be restrained, even with a chain. Even when he was put in chains and shackles, as he often was, he snapped the chains from his wrists and smashed the shackles. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night he wandered among the burial caves in the hill, howling and cutting himself with stones. Of course, that's who's on the other side, isn't it? A man possessed by demons. What else did you think we'll find over there, Jesus? Someone who's wild, someone who's untamable, threatening, dangerous. Yet loving like Jesus means that we're prepared to cross to that other side, to the other side of our towns, to the next town over, to the other side of the schoolyard or the workplace, to the other side of the room, to those who don't look like us, speak like us, act like us. The way that they relate to each other is different to how we do. They hold different ethics or values or beliefs as us. Those that we want to demonize, those that we want to protect ourselves from, those we don't want to associate with. You know, even today as we're in this room, I think there's some of us that don't know the people who sit on the other side of the church from us. And loving like Jesus means that we are prepared to cross to that other side. Who in your life are the people that live on the other side that we need to love like Jesus? Who are those people? We could go on with many examples through Jesus' ministry and interactions. Look at Luke 19 with Zacchaeus being the chief tax collector, the one who's ripping people off, who's funding and profiting off the oppression of his own people. And Jesus comes up to him and says, I'm having dinner at your house. And loving like Jesus means that we're prepared to move past the pain that's caused to us and give someone a second chance. Or we could look in Mark 10 with the rich young ruler. Right? And this is the guy who passionately wants to come to Jesus, wants to follow Jesus. He's kept the law. He's done everything right. And Jesus goes, well, what about all that money you've got? Are you prepared to give that away? And he's like, oh, no, I'm not. And loving like Jesus means that we're prepared to call out the things that are unhelpful in each other's lives that stop us from following Jesus. Or when Jesus is away with his disciples in Matthew 15, and he's in Gentile territory, and this lady comes and he's begging at his feet, and his disciples are like, get rid of her. She doesn't deserve to be here. Cast her out. And Jesus echoes the sentiment of their hearts, makes an image of it, and says, you need to get away from here, you dog, to her. And she responds with the statement, even dogs get to eat from the master's table. He's like, you're right. You're welcome. You get my blessing too. And identifies the discrimination that was in his disciples' hearts. See, loving like Jesus means that we don't discriminate based on our decisions of if someone's worthy or not, or our own preconceived judgments. And I find this really challenging, that example. Like, I think I do all right, personally, at loving people. I'm sure a lot of us do. But I got some mates, and they connect with people that make me feel uncomfortable. I'm sure a lot of us would feel uncomfortable. And they've been loving and connecting with these people for some time. This community looks different to ours. They talk differently. Some of them are on drugs. Most of them have different sexual preferences and expressions. And they've been connecting. They laid aside their preconceived judgments and stepped out towards them, crossed to the other side, joined them at their tables, heard their stories, loved them, embraced them, welcomed them. And recently, after a couple of years of journeying with them, they've just been to baptisms of these guys as they've come to follow Jesus. They've joined my friends in worship services and lifted their hands in praising Jesus because they were prepared to step out towards them and love them like Jesus. Jesus' life was filled with practical examples of showing love in everyday interactions. And for us, if we want to be singing from this songbook of loving like Jesus, it will also involve us stepping out towards others and showing them love in practical ways so that they can taste and see who God is. Jesus' life is full of interactions as he stepped towards people, as he walked with people, as he interacted with people. And I think the most famous example of this for me, the one that resonates with me, comes from Luke 24, where Jesus, after his death and his resurrection, he's walking along a road to Emmaus with some people who have been following him. And they were pretty downcast. Their hearts were heavy because they've just seen the one that they're following be crucified. And as he walks with them, they don't recognize who Jesus is. The road was long. It was windy. It had its up and downs. It was bumpy along the way. It's just like any number of our journeys that goes up, down, and bumpy and twists and turns. And as they walked along this road together, Jesus gradually revealed who he was to them. He told the stories. He reminded them about who God was. He built relationships with them to the point that even when they reached their destination, Jesus was prepared to go on. They're like, no, you need to stop and have dinner with us. You need to join us at our table, which Jesus does. It's enough relationship to be invited into their place. And then as they shared a meal, Jesus broke bread, and in a moment, they saw who Jesus actually was. As he broke bread, they recognized him. You see, if we want to be a community that embraces loving like Jesus, it means that we must be prepared to walk the long journey with people, walk the long journey of their lives, share life together, share conversations together, share meals together, support one another, and hope that too in us there'll be a moment that they see Jesus. They see the love of Jesus. It'll be very easy for us to sit back and just love those who walk through our door. But loving like Jesus demands that we're prepared to step out towards the other, to step out towards our neighbors, to step out of our comfort zones into the experiences of others and show love in practical ways, to slow down enough to see people, to hear their stories, to embrace those whom others judge, who they isolate, exclude, who are called unclean. Loving like Jesus means we must be prepared to cross to the other side, to move past the pain that's been caused to give someone another chance, to call out the barriers or injustice or obstacles that get in the way of following Jesus and doing so from a posture of love. It requires us to not discriminate based on our decisions of someone's worthiness or our own preconceived judgments. So loving like Jesus means that we're prepared to walk the long journey with people, to share life, conversations, actions, in the hope that they can see and receive this love. We do that because that is what singing the song of loving like Jesus looks like. And if we're not prepared to do that, if we say, I don't want to love like that, maybe we need to ask if we're prepared to follow Jesus at all. But if we do begin to love like that, if we do begin to show love, imagine what that will do to our world. Imagine our communities as they start to experience the hope, meaning, and love of Jesus because people took following Jesus seriously and wanted to step out and to love others. Imagine what they'll do to your neighbors to love like that. Imagine them experiencing the hope, meaning, and love of Jesus, and they could stand up and share stories of how Jesus has impacted them. And that begins with asking the question, who in your world, in my world, needs to experience the love of Jesus like that? And are we prepared to step towards them? That's what it means to sing the song of loving like Jesus. Let's pray together. Father, I pray that we would be a community here that would first know the love of a God that was not wanting to just sit back. That we would know your love, the love that's prepared to step into our world, to see each of us, to know each of us, to interact with each of us, to show us that we are people that are worthy. We're people of value. To know your love that transforms our lives so we can know your hope, meaning, and love in the deepest parts of our lives. And then as we know this truth, I pray that we would not hold this to ourselves, but that we will be a people that wants to shine this to the world around us, to see our world transformed by your hope, see our world transformed by the meaning that you bring, by the love that you have. I pray for us as a community that as we sing these songs of wanting to be centered on you, welcoming everyone into our midst and loving like you, that people's lives will begin to see who you are. Not as a knowledge, but as an interaction. They would feel your love. Father, would you reveal to us today, who sit in this room, who join us online, those people in our lives that you want us to go to step out of our comfort zone and to be the expression of your love towards. May we be known as your people who are loving. Pray in Jesus' name.